Welcome to GovCast, connecting with federal IT's top decision makers. I'm Alexander Bolova, production lead at GovCIO Media and Research. With me today is Editor-in-Chief Amy Kluber. Hi, Amy.
Hello.
So you had the opportunity to chat with Keith Sonderling, Commissioner of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. How'd that go?
It was awesome, especially timely given today's AI environment, which is mainly what our conversation focused on.
Yeah, so tell me more about AI, because we all are aware of ChatGPT and just, you can type something in and something gets spit back out at you. But I find it difficult to see how this would connect to the mission of the EEOC. So what did Keith say about that?
Definitely. Yeah, to most people, it might not be obvious, but to many people, especially in the tech industry, we're familiar with the tools and systems that are increasingly using AI and working with algorithms and the data that are feeding those tools. And in the context of employment, HR teams are increasingly using AI to feed through resumes or help them get to a faster hiring decision, et cetera. So, with this increased use of automated systems, including those with AI, you can get into kind of testy waters with making unfair decisions with hiring. And so that's really what this talk centered on. He kind of dove into the legal landscape. There isn't a comprehensive regulation around using AI systems. And I think that's what we're starting to see in the federal government right now is how it's going to be regulated, especially how it's going to be regulated to be ethical and fair. And so, in the context of the EEOC, they're taking a close look at this to make sure that companies are complying with the Civil Rights Act, of course, and making sure that they are continuing to have a fair employment environment for employees, regardless of whether they use AI systems or not.
Gotcha. It's really fascinating to hear the legal perspective behind this, because I know in most of our talks, we're talking about the technology, the cyber, like what actually goes into it, data. But to kind of hear it from this, maybe not outside perspective, but a different one is really fascinating.
It is. And he is a lawyer by trade. So you'll kind of start to hear some of that in this conversation for all the legal buffs out there who also might take an interest to that. So the way he talks about it is just very interesting.
Well, I personally can't wait to dive into this conversation. So let's not wait any longer. Let's take a listen to your interview.
Welcome to GovCast, Keith. It's so awesome to have you. I'm sitting here with Keith Sonderling, Commissioner of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and I'm excited to really dig into a lot of the work you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a really great platform to be able to talk about the innovative approach trying to take here to regulate all employment discrimination and specifically artificial intelligence.
Definitely. So I definitely want to get into more of that here in a second. But to start us off, the organization has such an important role from a government perspective on what it means to have a fair workplace in this country. So what brought you to the agency and this mission?
Well, I was a labor and employment lawyer in Florida before joining the government in 2017, where I first joined the U.S. Department of Labor. And then I was nominated to the EEOC and confirmed by the Senate in September 2020. So I've been doing labor and employment law my entire career. And, working both at the Department of Labor and now to being a commissioner at the EEOC sort of has been a dream come true. You have to pinch myself sometimes to realize, what an important mission these federal labor and employment agencies have and how we really impact the workforce. But at the EEOC, when you think of employment laws, when you think of employment discrimination and sort of all the big ticket issues, that's really at our agency here. And we're a separate agency, as you know, from the Department of Labor. We're an independent agency. And our mission is to prevent and remedy unlawful employment discrimination and advance equal opportunity for all in the workplace. A lot of people know us because in the United States, you cannot sue your employer, whether you work for a private company, whether you work for state, local government, or the federal government, without coming to the EEOC. So we literally see every case of discrimination in the United States. And that's how most people know us, that, you've either been fired or terminated or not paid properly or not hired. And, you need to go to the EEOC. But we do have a very broad mandate also to prevent employment discrimination from happening in the first place, in addition to advancing equal opportunity for all in the workplace. So that's where a lot of the proactive work we do as well. But our laws apply not only to current employees, but also job applicants. And it prevents discrimination on the big ticket items. So you think about race, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, pregnancy, national origin, age, disability, and genetic information. And although a lot of people think of the EEOC, well, I got fired, I need to go to the EEOC. It's so much more than that. Our laws apply to hiring, firing, promotions, training, wages, benefits, prevents retaliation and harassment as well. So we have a lot on our plate. The entire Me Too movement is out of this agency as far as preventing that from happening, enforcing there, everything going on with pay discrimination. When you think about the big ticket items in the news, like the U.S. women's soccer team, those issues, all workplace harassment. When it came to COVID, as far as COVID accommodations to vaccines, that's all under our umbrella here. So, we are, like I say, and a little biased because I work here, the premier civil rights law enforcement agency in the world, because you're really dealing with some of the most fundamental civil rights we have. Our agency was created out of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which, as you know, started with Martin Luther King marching here in Washington, D.C. So we're very aware of that. And it's really an incredible honor to be a commissioner here.
Fantastic. And it's definitely so many mission areas, I guess many don't really think about, especially when we're going to be talking here in a second about AI and some of its impact on the workplace. So considering AI's, emerging place it has in government right now, but also society, what role does EEOC play at this moment we're at right now in AI development and adoption in workplaces?
Well, whether you're aware of it or not, and I think most people are not aware of it, but, AI in HR has been around for some years. And the reason I'm talking about AI and the reason the EEOC is looking at AI and the government as a whole is looking at AI in different uses is that employers are already using it to make decisions about people's employment. So AI writes job descriptions, it screens resumes, it chats with applicants, it conducts job interviews. In some cases, it predicts if an employee will accept an offer and for how much. There's other software out there that predicts how that employee will interact with their new coworkers. It identifies employees' current skills and potential skills. There's AI that tracks productivity. There's AI that assesses sentiment. So are my employees happy every day? Or are they going to leave? There's AI who picks who's going to get promotions, new jobs, do performance reviews. And there's even AI out there that will tell you you're fired if you don't meet performance reviews. So That's not my forward-looking prediction. For each and every one of these tasks I just mentioned, you can find a commercially available product where vendors are willing to sell to company right now. And obviously the pandemic has increased the speed of these developments. So because it's happened so fast, because it's used on a mass scale, there was really no guidance, no best practices, no general awareness of the potential legal ramifications or significant enforcement yet. So my raising awareness was saying, this is the future. This is the future of HR. Everyone is going to be subject to this technology. How do we do it in a way where we can provide different stakeholders guidance based upon our long-standing laws? So, now we're dealing with technology vendors who need to learn the EEO laws. We need to deal with companies who are now implementing these tools to help their workforce, to make their workforce more efficient, to make their workforce more diverse. And they're the ones with the ultimate liability here. So how do they implement these programs in accordance with civil rights law? And most importantly, the employees who are going to be subject to this technology. How do we make sure that they know that and that the rights that they're afforded in the workplace also apply equally here? So that's sort of been why it's been so important for us to dive in there. It's out there, it's happening, and we need to make sure that it's deployed in accordance with these civil rights laws.
Definitely. And you definitely need that aspect of a fair workplace, especially the commission to be right there alongside agencies who are starting to formulate, how they're even going to tackle some of the regulations around the standards and the implementation of AI. So it's very interesting to observe. I do want to bring up the draft strategic enforcement plan that the commission for the first time opened up for public comment earlier this year. A big focus of that was AI. So talk through how this plan is looking at AI. Why was it important to open it up for comment, and where does that plan stand right now?
So as you know, not unique to the EEOC, agencies put out their strategic plans and it goes out for public comment. So we have a draft of our strategic enforcement plan that's done every 5 years. And we have a lot of topics, everything from protecting vulnerable workers to new emerging issues post-pandemic related to discrimination against individuals now with COVID disability, related to mental health issues remaining to new and developing areas of the law that the Supreme Court has dictated. There's been a lot of changes in employment law from the Supreme Court. LGBT discrimination is covered. There's cases now related to religious discrimination at the Supreme Court. So a lot of those issues, but AI was front and center there for good reason. So that means it's an official priority if, of course, the plan needs to be approved, but we already have an AI initiative that we launched in October 2021. So that's really makes it an official priority of the agency. And when it goes in our strategic enforcement plan, that's how we're rated as an agency. That's how the career employees in the field, their performance reviews also based upon how they're hitting the metrics in our strategic enforcement plan. But it really stems from in October of 2021, which I just alluded to, we formally announced an initiative on the use of AI in the workplace. And this initiative will examine more closely how technology is fundamentally changing the way employment decisions are made. The initiative aims to guide applicants, employees, employers, and technology vendors, everyone I was discussing earlier that's going to be part of this new equation related to technology, that they're used fairly and consistent with federal equal employment opportunity laws. As part of the new initiative, we're developing an internal work group, launch a series of listening sessions, gather information, identify promising practices, and issuing technical assistance. We've already issued 2 technical assistance guidance, one on the Americans with Disability Act and how disabled workers under the ADA are going to interact with these online and digital tools to make sure that they're not screened out because they have a disability, to make sure that they are able to use these programs with an accommodation if necessary, and also some guidance related to how employees can do testing to make sure that these products are not discriminating and using it for intended purpose. So it's in our plan. It's going to be a priority agency. So what there you'll see generally when something goes into the enforcement plans is a mix of enforcement, obviously, and guidance as well. So basically it locks it in to being a big deal for the EEOC for at least the next 5 years.
Fantastic. Considering the commission's enforcement mission, kind of on the flip side of that, where do you think AI can make the most impact in the workplace, whether it's the technology or the workforce itself, or even the commission itself?
Yeah, and this is really, especially with everything you're hearing in Congress right now and the news with ChatGPT, AI is so hot. But in our space, carefully designed and properly used, I believe that AI does have the potential to advance diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in the workplace by mitigating the risk of unlawful discrimination. And I'll give you some examples shortly. But as soon as I say that, I also have to remind everyone that at the same time, poorly designed and carelessly implemented, that AI can discriminate on a scale and magnitude far greater than any individual HR professional, because like any bad HR decision, poor uses of artificial intelligence will damage the trust in the organization, create a toxic work culture, and ultimately damage profitability. Because AI, if when you dig into it, you realize it's only as good as its purposeful and insightful application by those who are using it with an eye on actual impact with the law. And what does that mean here? It's about the quality of data being used. And I'm not a scientist. We don't do data analysis at the EEOC. For us, the training data is really, who are those applicants? Who are, the people who are being subject to this system? Because AI predictions about specific applicants are only as sound as that training data on which the algorithms rely. And what we're stuck with now and how employment decisions have been made, in somebody's brain. And we really don't know what a person's true motives are when they make a hiring decision or make a firing decision. Was it for a lawful reason, like they weren't meeting performance, or was it for an unlawful reason because of a protected characteristics, like the person is a woman or, of a certain race, national origin, gender? But AI, if it's carefully designed, it can mask for race, gender, age, disability, and other characteristics that have prevented people from entering and thrive in the workforce. It can mask for proxy terms like people's names of sports teams, or someone's graduation date, which are all indicative of protected classes. And it can actually help employers take that skills-based approach, which everyone's looking to. And, in the federal government now, there's been so much push about a skills hiring, moving away from degrees and looking to see how we're actually getting the best workers. But it can also offset the confidence gaps that leads women to underreport their abilities on their resumes and men to overstate theirs. It can help users identify candidates' adjacent skills that may not even know, but the AI that can pick up. So it can really help identify candidates not only on their merit, but on their potential while stripping out that human bias. So, really simple examples of this, an AI-enabled resume screening program can be taught to disregard variables that have nothing to do with job performance. Like, think about a really basic one, somebody's name. What does somebody's name tell you about the ability for them to perform the job? Nothing. What it does tell you is things that the EEOC has said you are not allowed to make a hiring decision on, such as the applicant's sex, national origin, religion, or race. An AI-enabled program that conducts preliminary screening interviews can also be engineered to disregard factors such as age, sex, race, disability. It can even disregard factors that suggest a candidate's membership in a protected class, like a foreign accent or speech impairments. And another example is a lot of companies now are using, your phone or apps to do the initial interview, and they record your voice and they base it off of what you say. So instead of, what you look like and all those other characteristics that you can't unsee when you see in an interview, it actually takes the way you respond to the questions in an answer. And that may prevent some of the discrimination we've historically seen. Like, it's not unheard of for an interviewer to meet a highly qualified candidate who is visibly pregnant, disabled, or religiously observant and think to themselves, well, this person's going to cost me because they want an accommodation. This person's going to need leave for healthcare. Leave's going to cost me. It's not worth it. So I'm going to go with someone else with similar skills who won't make those requests. And although this is highly illegal, it's one that happens and we never know the real reason why. And those people historically have not been able to get past that first step. And using AI to actually show what their skills are and their ability, you don't know about that. And I think that's really important. But, at the same time, like, let's use that voice example of recording somebody's voice and having machine learning go and look at the words they say and the order they say to see if that's the right answers. What happens if the person has a thick foreign accent? What happens if the person's disabled and stuttered? So I can speak fluent English and say answers that are not as great as somebody with a thick foreign accent or somebody who stutters, but the computer's going to pick up my voice more than theirs, even though their answers may be better. And that's national origin discrimination. That's disability discrimination right there. So for each use, you can see there's potential positives, but if it's not designed properly, if it can't account for those foreign accents, then it's going to be, discrimination right there. And that's what the trickiness in all of this. There's a lot of benefits, a lot of really helpful things, but if it's not designed properly, it can discriminate even though it doesn't intend to. And what's so important to remember under federal employment law is that whether you or not you intend to discriminate, employers are liable. So if I say, I want to use this AI to intentionally discriminate and remove all older workers with a few clicks, you could do that. There's that intentionality there. But what happens if you're having the AI look for a characteristic that has the unintended consequences of screening out older workers, even though you really want older workers? The liability is going to be the same either way. So that's why it's so critical that we're engaged in this conversation early for HR professionals who are thinking about using this or wanting to use this.
Right. I can say no AI was made in the taping of this interview. So
yeah, this is all real. These are real voices.
So on the, you touched on a number of the potential harms there, because with good can come bad,
Right.
especially if there's nefarious actors who want to get a handle on what you're putting into the algorithms, or, the AI is only as good as what you put into it. So can you go through, I guess, like how you're prioritizing, or how the commission is prioritizing some of the potential harms that AI could have in making it a fair workplace?
Yeah, and a lot of it is just making the awareness of the easier examples of, who's using the system. And if somebody has bias and they want to look through resumes, there's a stat out there that the average person in talent acquisition looking at resumes takes around 7 seconds to look at a resume. So if they have bias and they don't want to hire, let's say, a female older worker from a certain country, they have to physically look for that, and it takes time. But with AI, with a few clicks, you can do that and look at hundreds of thousands of resumes in 0.7 seconds. So you see how quickly it can actually increase. So, but that's the intentional use. The unintentional discrimination is that, there's a classic example of a company that used AI to look at all the job applicants and people in a certain position over the prior 10 years. And they asked the machine learning to go through and rate the candidates on a scale from 1 to 5. And it came back and it automatically lowered any females with any indications of being a female, having gone to a women's college, or playing women's sports team. And it wasn't doing that because of a misogynistic intent to discriminate against women. It was doing that because the vast majority of people who applied to the positions and got the positions were men. So, as simple as that, discrimination is going to occur there because the data set, which is the applicant pool, is predominantly made up of one race, one gender. So it's just going to replicate those biases if they're not controlled for. So that's why, we're encouraging people to really make sure when they're buying these programs to test it, to implement it in their workforce, to make sure that before you're ever using a decision, to make a decision on someone's livelihood, that you have a very diverse applicant pool data set that's not going to just see that the predominant characteristic is being a man. And that's, so if it's only men, that must be the number one most important thing for this job. Or, you could have the most diverse data set. An example I went through before, where you have a manager who's not properly trained on the system to go in there and then use it to create bias. So you could see there some of the significant issues that employers need to understand before implementing these programs.
Definitely. I love some of the legal hints that you've sprinkled in through a lot of this conversation. I can definitely sense that you have a legal background, if you will. How would you say that background has helped shape your approach to how you're thinking about some of these policies and issues in AI?
Well, for me, I just think that because this is the future, because there's so many benefits to it, right? And really, look, the EEOC collects over $500 million a year from employers, including last year, $132 million against the federal government. So employment bias is out there. It's happening. We get 60, 70,000 charges just on the federal level from private employers every single year. So there's an issue, and we haven't been able to solve it. And if we can use technology to help us meet our mission to diversify the workforce, to prevent discrimination, I think that's a really good thing. So, from my background, I says, in a way, we're going to have to embrace this. We can't just say, it's going to cause harm. We need to be aware of the potential harm it's going to cause, but also be aware of the potential significant benefits here, and just make sure, like any other new technology, like anything else, we have the programs and policies and procedures and training in place to actually make it work, and to be okay to abandon it and not use it if it's going to cause discrimination. You can only do that if you put more time into it. And that's the issue, is that a lot of these programs are sold to make decisions more efficient, faster, effective. And when it comes to using AI in HR, it's just a different story. You have to slow down because you're dealing with civil rights. And that's really where my background is helping me shape how we need to look at this.
Right. It's definitely a human issue at that point.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Keith. This was fantastic. Really good insight into kind of that ethics and legal standpoint of AI and where it's really going in government. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Amy. That was a really fascinating conversation. Before we let our listeners go, do you have any last thoughts or takeaways that you want to leave our listeners with?
I think definitely keep following to see what comes of the AI regulation that is continuing to take shape. Sounderling said himself, there's a lot of regulation out there that, even though it's not specific to AI, it's something that can help companies and teams guide their use of adopting AI. So there's nothing to be scared of in regards to the technology. A lot of people, seem confused about it, or there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of misunderstandings, but it's really not scary. And as long as you're just, adopting it with the law in mind, everything is going to be okay. But you still need to make sure it's ethical and that you're exercising it with fair employment practices.
Right. And I think if our listeners take a look through our podcast archives, you can see that we have been paying attention to ethical AI for a while now. And, I don't want to say that we are ahead of the curve, but we were. This is stuff that we've been talking about for years now. And it's so interesting, at least to me, to see kind of the rest of the culture start paying as much attention to this as we have. So listeners should definitely keep following GovCIO Media and Research to keep up with this ever relevant topic of AI. But with that, that is all for today's GovCast. If you like what you heard, please leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice and leave a 5-star rating as well. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I'm Alexander Bolova.
I'm Amy Kluber.
Thank you for listening. GovCast, along with HealthCast and Cybercast, is a production of GovCIO Media and Research. For more podcasts and to check out the other shows, head to govciomedia.com. Watch out for new episodes released every Tuesday and Wednesday across our shows. You can follow all of them on your favorite podcast platform. And if you like what you heard, make sure to let us know by leaving a review. And if you have any topics you think we should look into, contact us at newsletter@govcio.com.